My guess, you don't do that a lot. My guess is you don't mess things up a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back live with Brain Food from the Heartland, the Louis B. Free radio show. And I can't imagine there's anyone, unless you just started listening today, that hasn't heard me talking about Rebel with a Clause, tales and tips from a roving grammarian. And I am so delighted to have the author, Ellen Jovin, on with me today. Ellen, good morning. Welcome. I'm delighted.
Thank you, Louie. I'm so happy to be here.
I am, and I have to say, communicating with you, and of course, seeing you on TV has been a joy. I love your personality, and
Oh, thank you.
that's I have learned over the years that's not always the case, and I don't mean to make this too well. Maybe I've said this too many times for regular listeners. You could really love someone's work and then speak with them. And see, I need better. My vocabulary's waning also. You're not, yeah, it is a little disappointing. It's like, oh God, I thought he'd be, or I thought you would be a little more vibrant. And they know their subject, which is great. It's still wonderful talking with them. I just feel a little, I really wanted to like them personally.
But sometimes it goes the other way. I email people who are really they're kind of stiff, and they sound unfriendly in email, and then I meet them in real life, and it's like, woo, they're really lively and friendly and warm people.
It does. It does. I'm not going to mention the author's name, but I got pitched an author, a fiction writer, a few months ago, had him on. Um, didn't realize till I started doing my homework a little late. After reading enough the book, having that he had written, I can't remember how many New York Times #1 best-selling. The publicist asked me to have him on. It's a publicist I have a relationship with, and it was interesting because he was so down to earth also, and it is you know when I'm reading about him, I'm thinking, oh, this guy's going to be rough or tough, or he's already is so successful with writing, and he was great. He was so down to earth. So I
Well,
I
that's
hear what
the
you're saying.
thing. That's the kind I think that summarizes the experience for me sitting around at the grammar table, that people constantly surprise me. And I think that's a thing that is just rejuvenating and inspiring, and just about general life experience, that you can be surprised by people.
Yeah, and I love
In
that.
a good way. In a good way, I mean, not the
Yeah.
bad way.
Well, both sometimes,
Right, that's true.
and
But
again,
more the other.
I don't mean the others are bad. Let's get into your background a little bit and how this all started. I've got, in fact, 25 languages you've studied.
I've studied, that's right, which I want to make clear is not the
Yeah,
same as speaking at all.
sure.
But right, like yesterday I went for a walk, and I was listening to German verb conjugations on my walk.
Can you say that? Will you say that again, please?
I went for a walk in Central Park, and I'm refreshing my languages, which have declined, especially over the past couple of years where I was at home more. So I was listening to tables of German verbs. So the speaker was just reading through German verb conjugations, all the different forms, tenses, subjunctive, and so on, just to kind of get my brain active with German again.
That's it. That is interesting though, and that's a great way to, when you're walking. I can see how you could absorb that. When I've been out hiking or walking, I don't think, no, I've never listened to verb conjugations in any language, but maybe it's a good way to learn language. I don't know. You would know better. But again, studying language, where do you think that comes from? The fascination, the interest.
I don't really know. You mean my own interest in it?
Yes, personally.
I don't really know exactly. I think it's a combination of genetics and exposure. I mean, I think I am naturally inclined to be interested in these technical elements. I liked math when I was a kid too, and went quite far with that before switching over to language completely in college. But I have people in my family who speak different languages, so I've always had a lot of language input in my ears that I think made it maybe more fun and more real for me.
And I love that. Ellen, again, I'm interested in language, not studying them, but it's interesting to hear how different. For me, if I know someone speaking another language, whatever, just talk with them a little bit or hear different. I always love hearing people use different expressions and then get into a discussion with someone else as that's not how you say it, or that's not, it doesn't mean that. I mean, those I, re-
It's so much
I
fun.
remember
I
that
love
growing
that.
up also.
Yeah, I love that. As long as they are grounded in kindness and an appreciation that there are different ways for human beings to do things. Those conversations are so much fun. They're so playful. That's what people should be talking about at Thanksgiving instead of the things they're talking about right
About
now. It would be
politics.
so it's a great way to get I don't know. I just think it sometimes the discussions are kind of mean about language, like you're doing it wrong, blah blah blah. But I
Yeah.
don't. I think it should be more curiosity about across demographics, across geographies. Like what are some of the varieties that you hear? It's entertaining.
It would, yeah, and it would be interesting to talk. I don't understand. I've been pitched, and I'm not doing them last year, this year, about how to get along at Thanksgiving with how to get. I mean, really, you're gonna. I mean, this you're coming together with family and friends to eat and enjoy and spend time with each other, and you are discussing. Okay, but do you really want to bring politics to the dinner
Well,
table?
my holiday fantasy would be to just show up at a few different Thanksgiving dinners and participate in some kind of word discussion. I think it would be so funny, especially in a big family with lots of generations.
Yeah,
So
that
just
would
if anyone wants to invite me
invite
over,
you. You're on your way.
I'm
You
on
could,
my way.
yeah, that would be great. The grammar table. Tell us how you developed that.
In 2018, I was sick of being on the computer all the time because um, the range of material for language nerds that's online now is unbelievable. When I was a kid, I couldn't just say, "Oh, I want to study Ukrainian. Let me find some materials in 2 seconds on the internet." I don't think I mean, maybe my local library had stuff like that, but now you can just really go nuts. There are language groups where you can talk about these things, especially on Facebook. I found tons of language groups, and I was just online so much, and hanging out with other language nerds arguing about preposition choice and what the form of the word should be in such and such a language. And I started to feel I was too separated from my fellow human beings, so I wanted to do what I was doing online but more in person. And so I just got a table and I made a sign and I went off for my late summer vacation because I started organizing this in July, but it's really hot in New York in July. I'm not going to sit out there and try to do anything in the sun in New York in July. And then I came back from my vacation, and in September I set it up. I unfolded the table and I started answering questions right outside my apartment building. And it's a great. I have the ideal grammar location. They say location is important. Um, I could not have found a better location than right outside my building because my neighborhood is full of writers and editors, and I'm at an express subway stop. And that, for
Wow.
grammar table to work, you have to have foot traffic. Actually, all you have to have is traffic. You don't really need anything else. Anyone, anywhere, like I can always find people to talk to me. So that's what I did.
And ended up traveling by car 21,554 miles, plane 4,000, almost 5,000. I mean, train, foot, boat. You went at it.
Well, actually, since the book came out, originally I was going to go to all 50 states before the book came out, but then COVID hit and we were at 47. My husband and I went everywhere together. He filmed all of the encounters all over the country. So we got to 47 states in January 2020, came home, and we're going to head out again and do the remaining three, which were Hawaii, Alaska, and Connecticut. Then COVID happened, so it took I think 2 years and 7 months before I was actually traveling with it again. And I have just as of Saturday we came back from Hawaii, where I set up
Oh,
the grammar
yay.
table on a cliff. among other places. And so now I've done 50. And the mileage is, I need to update that mileage because I added a lot of
Yeah.
frequent
Oh,
flyer
yeah.
miles going to Hawaii and Alaska.
Why? I bet that had to be wonderful.
Hmm.
Yeah. I
It
mean,
was it was great.
when you haven't really gotten into Rebel with a Clause yet, but again, doing this and building up to it, Ellen, the areas you were in had to be very obviously very different. Was there
Yes.
certain geographic areas that were focused more? Did you find focused more on different questions, different issues?
Well, the just because even though I talk to a lot of people in each place, my sample size is going to be small and random compared to the overall population. So I try not to generalize based on few encounters. I did get asked about ain't in Ohio more than anywhere else.
Ain't
About whether ain't is a word. Yes, but when I say
in
that,
Ohio.
I think I was asked about that twice there and almost never anywhere else, but it's still it was kind of funny, um, to be asked even twice about that in any state because usually that doesn't usually come up that much. And then in some regions, I think it wasn't really that the grammar questions varied so much. It was more that people were more surprised that there was a table with a grammar sign on the sidewalk because apparently there wasn't a tradition of having grammar tables locally.
Anywhere. Anywhere,
But I think
right?
it's more, in New York, there are always weird tables for all kinds of things. And so some places I think people just don't do that as much. So it was more, I found that just like the street table culture to vary more than the grammar itself.
That's interesting. So, and what did you tell them about ain't in Ohio?
I said,
It
"Oh,
ain't.
if people use it as a word, it's a word." But I felt the people, in a way, I felt the people, but it's not a formal word. You aren't going to use it in an annual report, but of course it's a word. And I think in each case the person asking already knew that, if I'm recalling correctly.
Sure.
I mean, they
Yeah.
were just sort of, it was a grammar table troll maybe.
Oh. I'm talking with Ellen Jovin. I love her book, Rebel with a Clause, Tales and Tips from a Roving Grammarian. Of course, you write about it starting at the beginning of the book and what you're doing with it. And the chapter titles are so many places I want to go. I was communicating. You don't mind if I just jump around? I mean,
Oh, I that's how I
um,
operate. I feel completely at home. Let's be
right.
nonlinear together.
Yes, I love that. But commas, and you write about commas. And I was telling you when we were communicating, I was telling you before we came on, Ellen, that and it's a personal issue, obviously. I obsess about should there have been a comma there. I overthink it these days, and that's probably something mentally going on with me. But I really do. I'm serious. I do. I think about starting a sentence with the word "but." I just or and why I hadn't thought about it in the my previous 69 years, I don't know, but I'm thinking about it a lot now. Talk with us about use and overuse, if you will, or underuse of commas.
Um, there are, well, I what you just described made me think of one of the reasons that I like doing this, which is that people people are interested in details, and there's sort of a philosophy drifting around that grammar doesn't matter. It's what you say, as long as people understand, that's fine. But there are always ways to tighten up what we write, and um, I also think that it is empowering to people to feel like they have a handle on basic rules so they can focus on content. If people don't if they aren't confident about commas, then they start thinking about that. And I don't want to be doing that. I want to be thinking about my message.
Sure. Yeah.
Actually, I personally do want to be thinking about it because I think it's so interesting. But but in general, I think I personally, because of the way I am, would find it crippling if if I didn't have a technical grasp, just because that's the way my brain operates. I can't feel free to just say what I want unless I know the comma goes there and not there. The one as you may know, the most common question I got everywhere I went was about the Oxford comma, also
In
known
Oxford.
as the
Yes.
serial comma, which is the one before an and in a list. So I ordered boxes, stationery, and highlighters. So do you put a comma before the and or not? And the you can do either. It kind of depends on what the context is, and maybe there is a style guide that your company or the publication you're writing for follow. Um, uh, so I'm trying to figure out if that should have been follows. I forgot what I just said. Okay, so I'm conjugating verbs on the fly. Now I'm getting self-conscious about my conjugations.
Oh,
But anyway, people want to know, and they want to have consistency in certain things so that they can enjoy the rest. Like, you don't want the TV crooked on the wall. You want the comma in the right place.
I agree. I love when you started that a national obsession, the Oxford comma. I've got lots of things circled in the book, and starting off with that and the discussion about it. And of course, I'd never heard actually of the Oxford comma, but you explain it.
Louis, I'm already excited just by the fact that you're mentioning my chapter titles, because I haven't gotten to talk about that at all. And I had so much
I
fun with
love.
them, because I even made some of the chapter titles little grammar quizzes. There's like chapter what did I do? I did, weird plurals, your data underscore. So then people have to, like, there's a blank. Your data blank is are giving me a headache. So I don't know. I think I might be the first person who put grammar quizzes in chapter titles. And if so, I just want that to be recognized.
And it's interesting that you said that about chapter titles, because that's one of the pages. I don't know if you can see it. I wrote chapter titles in the contents because I found it so intriguing. There,
Oh, yay.
yeah, that was before. And it's like, yeah, as I'm reading them, I'm thinking, affect and effect, spelling trolls, and just and the other, of course, comma, volume, colonoscopy,
Oh,
colonoscopy,
can I
the
feel I didn't
capitalization.
follow I feel I didn't
Right.
follow up on your comma question fully. Could I just add a sentence about
Please.
that?
Oh, please.
Okay, or maybe two or three. Um, some people have a heavier comma style, so there are lots of rules about commas and conventions that you kind of have to follow. But then there's a lot of gray area too, where you could put a comma or not put a comma. And some people use more. They're comma heavy people. Some people are comma light people, and it's a different style. I can enjoy both, so it doesn't have to be the same. It can be different. And even an email, I like when you see the variety of the person, you know? I mean, it's good to be professional and technically correct, according to formal conventions when you're writing at work or something. But I like the variety that you see with personality, and sometimes you can see even style and personality differences in the way people place their punctuation. It's kind of cool.
It's interesting. You're totally fascinated about it. And I love the Quizlets, by the way, at the end of
Thank you.
or
That was a late edition. I was working on a late revision, and all of a sudden I thought, oh, this should be
wow.
a quiz. This should be a quiz. I'm always doing quizzes, though. I put quizzes on Twitter all the time on my grammar table account, because I want people. I'm walking down the street, I see something, I stop and I type it on my phone as a little mini quiz on Twitter, because there's so many interesting things just in the air around us.
Or that again, and you can get more information. You can, of course, get the book ellen.com, ellenjovin.com. The book Rebel with a Clause: Tales and Tips from a Roving Grammarian, available everywhere online. Please try to buy it as close to home as possible, if possible, and keep those booksellers in your community. I will, please, if you can. I hope you don't mind. I know a lot of people like to direct things to Amazon, which is great for that.
I'm all
But
for it.
bookstores, yeah,
No, I'm all for it. Support your
good.
local bookstores.
Yeah, thank you. And even I've come to even the chains, because they're hiring local people and they're in your community. So I think that's absolutely wonderful. Again, jumping around the affect and effect, and again for me, and I have no way any expertise. If I see something that I feel is a mistake, it's like, wait a minute, that's not right, is it? And then I sort of, is it, or is it me? You find a lot of that, correct, with the affect effect.
Definitely. And if you do, as with all things, if you do it right, there are probably gonna be some people who still think you're wrong, which is one of the things that
It's
always
great. Yeah.
frustrates people. Yeah, but yes, and I think that for me is also another reason I care about this kind of stuff and enjoy thinking about it. When you write something, if you do something that's wrong or that doesn't fit conventions, it adds to the cognitive burden of the reader, and they have to think harder, they're distracted from your message. So minimizing disruption is really a lot. That's part of my goal in managing these details, but also if you understand sentence structure in a kind of deeper way, I think it can help you write better and be more interesting and dynamic and varied in writing. It's very empowering, I think.
Ellen, I loved in one of the quiz, let's see, about briefly correcting random strangers, etc. And I love your responses. When you are on a grammar reality show competing for, say, $10,000 worth of language books, otherwise, never, especially if you're wrong. I thought about that. Yeah, I'm sure there are correctors out there, but I would.
I hear from a lot of correctors, people who are correcting me,
Oh,
for
you're kidding.
example.
Oh,
Well, yeah, that's sort of I there's a lot there's a
oh,
lot of that out
that's
there
disturbing
in
to
the
me. Yeah.
grammar writer world. Especially I appreciate variety, and I of course I learned certain rules in school, but there are some of the rules are not really rules but more guidelines. And I find that often the correctors are either being overly pedantic or they're actually wrong. So that's a funny genre of email. Grammar correctors who commit grammar errors, who complain about a supposed grammar error, which isn't really an error, while committing additional grammar errors in their email.
Wow. I just I know there's those people out there that always want to, I'll use the expression, one up somebody else, or you think you're an expert and let me tell you where you're wrong. Yeah, that's
You must get messages like that. Do you never?
oh, my haters? You mean messages from
Not
haters?
haters really, but just like people about language. They hear you say like
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
if I
Yes.
right. So if
Yeah.
I pronounce something a particular way, or I have my verbal tics. I grew up in Southern California during the Valley Girl era,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can
Oh,
still see features of that in my language. You can see odd vowel things that maybe aren't typical of the East Coast. So I don't know. There are all kinds of things.
I get that. I get that. And they're not always mean. Yeah, they're pretty much mean spirited. It's
They
pretty,
aren't all no,
you
but it's true. They aren't always
that,
mean.
yeah,
There's
yeah, they're
sometimes they're
not.
fun.
I'm trying to soften it a little bit, but it wouldn't be accurate there.
And also, I think people just really don't realize their tone sometimes, because I've
Mm.
responded non in a non an annoyed way about it, and occasionally the person is says, "Oh, it's so great that you wrote to me. You know, I love your book." But in the
Oh,
meantime, the email
sweet.
all they said was that I wrote something wrong. So you that's another way people surprise you. They may sound churlish and grumpy, but then you find out that underneath it all they have a softy layer.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. But you're correct. They always have an edge to them and
Mhm.
I get the haters sometimes that they're are really nasty or really, it's more for me, it's more on opinions or
I would
topics,
think so, right.
and I never understood this from 20 plus years ago. Turn it off. What are no one's forcing you to listen. It's not like you're tied down to a chair and they put headsets on you. So that I love the part in your book when you wrote about Morgantown, West Virginia, about uh 62-year-old Gary first seemed taken aback, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't mind if I say that, I was stationed across the street from a statue of Don Knotts, who grew up there, and I grew up watching with, of course, the Andy Griffith Show, later on Three's Company, et cetera. And that it was interesting, just interesting how, and then that approach, or he approached you, and you said, "Have right, speak right." Asked Gary, do I have to speak right? And you responded, "You don't have to do anything. Do you have any grammar questions?" You encountered a lot of very, I don't want to say unusual, I sometimes maybe odd questions.
Yeah, that guy um was really wonderful. He said he didn't have any grammar questions, but then he hung out and talked
Yeah,
to me about grammar and all kinds of things. He was such a
interesting.
personality.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
love
I
how you
can still
describe the area.
oh, when I saw that statue of Don Knotts, I almost lost it because that's the kind of, when you go places you don't normally go, there are
Yeah.
little details that pop up you don't expect. I had no idea he was from there. And that was such, I mean, that we didn't have a lot of stations on TV when I was a kid. So to see that there really made an impression on me. It felt, I don't know, it's like learning more about your past. You find out
Yeah.
new details when you roam
And
around the country about things that were meaningful to you a long time ago.
when
And
you were a kid.
I just loved, we were kind of, it was so kind of hilly and rolling there. And I just had a great time.
Beautiful countryside. It was an interest, and I love how you wrote about it. And again, that description when you described that area, the Don Knotts. I certainly remember Don Knotts way before you remember Don Knotts. I'm, I'm certain.
I just had a birthday. So you have some years on me, but it may not
Oh,
be
I've got.
quite as many as you think. Hmm?
Oh, it's got to be. I'm not going to ask. I know better than to ask, but yes,
We can
yes.
we can discuss the math afterwards,
Yeah, yes,
privately.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Privately, we'll do that. Good fun with bad words, and I've got and you write about um, the F word, and I don't need to do it at Louis B. Free radio show, Brain Food from the Heartlands, an adult-oriented show intended for and only for a mature adult audience. Listeners' discretion is strongly advised. I never understood some of the disclaimers, and the other one, Ellen Jovin, I've got to say is the views and opinions expressed on the are the. Of course, they are. There wouldn't be anybody else's. I'm not, the callers. It's their. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to get in the whole thing with the disclaimers, but you write about that, and it reminded me of an old phone, smartphone that I had for a long time, and it worked great, and I was able to hide offensive words like with the text. I
Hmm.
click on, and people would always say, "So, Louis, if it comes up F asterisk asterisk asterisk, I know what it means. You're still saying it." I said, I don't
It's the
know. It was just
same.
a little in
Yeah.
case I say something and I don't want someone to receive it. Of all people, I certainly in my private life use expletives, if you will, plenty.
That's shocking to me. I
It's,
just would never have guessed that.
but it was something about that. And the phone I have now, um, I don't know how to do that, block the offense. So I'm very cautious about not saying. I just don't know who's going to read it or see it. I don't. I know it's odd. It's weird that then don't use the word, right? But oh,
Well,
well.
I've gotten some feedback on the inclusion of that F word discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah, the book was guided by what I got asked about the most.
the
So I
grandkids.
wanted to include it because people wanted to talk about it. But some people have not been happy that I included that. Um, just I
Oh, the
and
critics.
I don't know, but whatever people ask me, I'm there to talk about.
Yeah, the critics, right? Again, yeah,
Well, it offends people, and I understand that. I can appreciate that different people have different emotional responses to things. But in the chapter on the F word, I included both someone who was really objecting to widespread public use of it. And then I also included an anecdote from a young man who was excited to learn that if you stick it in the middle of a word, it can, as an intensifier, that's an infix as opposed to a suffix or prefix. So absablanking lutely. So he learned a linguistic term and he felt happy about it.
oh
And I think
yeah,
that's cool. That's education right there.
it is. It is. And again, I I would say, people don't need to read that. Skip the chapter if you want. I always the critics out there, right? Always the complainers and always the critics. A little bit more about that, about the words, about the F word, etc. Thought it was really a fun chapter. Chapter.
Well, I made a quiz. What I did find, I made a quiz at the end about it where you had to determine the part of speech that it was playing in a sentence. And I did actually put asterisks all over the place there because I found that when I wrote out the word too much in that little quiz, it seemed like a lot. So I self-censored a little bit. So there's an asterisk heavy page at the end of that chapter.
Yes, very heavy page, which again is fun. I thought it was lighthearted. And again, it
Oh,
was part. Go ahead, please.
when I was a kid, I thought there were two F words when I was in elementary school because a certain relative, when I asked about the F word, she told me it was fink. And so for a long time, I was really confused about why there were two F words. So I think it's good to discuss these things openly so people know what's going on.
I agree, Ellen. I absolutely need to discuss it. And if you don't want to read about it, don't read about it. Like I said about the show, just turn it off. You can skip the chapter, whatever. Again, I love the book Revel with a Clause, Tales and Tips from a Roving Grammarian. Ellen Jovin, the author, is my guest, ellenjovin.com. Again, I want to go back again, jumping all around into your background and the co-founder of Syntaxis.
Yes.
Tell
I
us a
for the
little bit about
past 20
Syntaxis.
plus year for 20 plus years I've had a company with my husband. It's just the two of us in New York, and we go into companies and other types of organizations, nonprofits, government organizations, and teach communication skills. I focus on the writing, he focuses on the oral communication skills, presentation skills. Um, and it's great because words, this is the thing, people cut when people are cutting these humanities programs from at colleges, liberal arts degrees, wo- word skill is one of those skills that you use across all fields. Even if you're heavily technical at work, you need language skill to communicate about what you're doing with other people, including people who may be slightly less interested in what you're doing than you are. So it's good to be able to write effectively and communicate effectively. And I've loved it. I worked as a freelance writer before that, and I've loved the way both activities have taken me into environments that are completely different from anything I would normally have seen. Companies making things I didn't know about, businesses doing things I didn't know about. I love that, and that is also a feature of the grammar table. All of these things using words that takes you into really anyone's field, and is I don't know. I think it's a powerful access point for lots of different experiences.
Again, just communicating the importance of it. And if you're not, you say before, whether we talked about whether you're using a word as defined, using it maybe more loosely.
Hmm.
However, if you're communicating, if someone really understands you, that's obviously primary importance. Problem is, you don't know how someone's receiving it.
Right. I think what's funny about grammar is that sometimes people have these superstitions in their head that prevent them from speaking in a way or communicating in a way that reflects their style and the ideas they want. Like this obsession with not ending with a preposition, which is a grammar myth, um, causes people to say things like, "That is the book about which I was telling you," instead of "That's the book I was telling you about." So it's important with grammar. It's important to check yourself. Do an annual or at least every 10-year check that you're up to date with current thinking on how these things should go. Because there are some things I was taught when I was a kid that just people don't subscribe to anymore.
It changes the rules.
Language changes, and also our understanding of language has improved. The ability to run search, do examinations of large bodies of text using computers helps us understand better how words are being used, how grammatical structures are being used. So instead of being subject to the opinion of an educated individual writing about usage, we can also check, oh, how do people use this word in a gazillion different contexts?
Interesting. When I was communicating with you last night, I just realized something. I was telling you that I was more nervous, seriously, more looking very much forward to talking with you, yet more nervous than I have been in nothing I can recall in 20 plus years. And who knows how many interviews, because I become so self-conscious of in the recent years. And
That's
I was,
terrible. I
I
don't
know
want that.
no, I know I probably was expressing it or a little bit lighthearted, but it was real. I was like, oh my God, I'm so nervous about this. And I'm going to be nervous about how I'm speaking. I've got to tell you, that all faded when we started to speak or talk with each other. And it hit me because I was like really thinking about make sure your words are correct, make sure you're, you know, pause when you've, etc. I was like freaking out last night, looking forward again to talking with you, but a little bit freaking out. Yet once I started talking with you, that was all gone.
I
And I,
do find well, your email was hilarious last night. Really, it was really charming and made me laugh. But I was nervous. I remember being very self-conscious when I wrote to Mary Norris, who is the comma queen from the New Yorker. And so I think this just happens to people when you write to someone who, for, you write to someone who specializes in usage or copy editing or whatever. It just feels important. But the reality is, most people like that, and that includes me, don't actually, they don't care. They don't care, but they're not sitting there saying, you shouldn't have written to me because you put a comma in the wrong place. They're not like that. And they're happy to have people write to them and communicate with them. It's not, I mean, as long as it's, if it's pleasant, that's the important thing.
that's yes, as pleasant. That's the important thing. You got a couple more minutes. I know we're at the top of the hour.
No, I do.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just getting my teeth cleaned in half an hour. That's all.
And have okay. I'll
Yeah,
be
yeah, no, it's not like anything critical is gonna happen.
well, but you got an appointment.
I'm
You
always
got,
punctual to my dentist. My dentist is very close by. I take my teeth very seriously.
I want to be respectful. I want to be respectful of your dentist, your time, etc. I, I'll try to move forward from where I was going to go. The results, the book, the grammar table. Now that it's been out, the book has been out, been available for a few months. What has that been like for you? And I know you're getting really good reviews.
It's been it's been busy, but that's partly because I combined post-publication activities with finishing the missing 3 states, which were far away, except for
Very,
Connecticut. So, yeah, it's been really nice. I've enjoyed the it's kind of funny because there's a lot more corresponding online from, with readers who have questions. So it's kind of taken me back to the computer, and I really want to be on the street. So that there's a tension with that. I'm trying to keep up with my email, which I haven't been able to do entirely, and still keep doing the table, which is the important thing for me is having that face-to-face communication that I think so many of us wish we had more of these days. It was kind of nice when you couldn't email people. N- Not a
I
people remember that time. I know you remember that
oh,
time.
you know, I remember that. And I don't even progression, how things have changed, seeing people. And I don't like when people say the kids these days, because I remember 50 plus years ago when they'd say the kids these days. I didn't like it then. It's too broad. There are some kids, yeah, that are always looking down at their phones and never looking at each other. And I, I, I get that. Yet a couple of months ago, I saw 4 kids, teenagers, walking up the street that I live on. They were talking. They didn't have their phones out. I mean, and I almost wanted to, and I certainly didn't. Looking like me, running up, saying, "Hey, you kids are looking at your phone." I didn't want the police action, but I was delighted to see that, and they were actually talking with each other, not texting. And I've seen the other. I've seen the other where people are sitting across from each other at a restaurant and they're looking down at their phones. But I get what you're saying. See, I wanted to say yet. I said but. I get what you're saying, which kind of negates what I. I'm so,
Well,
so I
it
use
doesn't.
yet.
Oh, well, it's the same. That sounds so fancy of you. It's the same outcome, more or less. You know what, though, about the kids with the phones, or just people with their phones in general?
Yeah.
One thing I really try to remember is that you never know what people are doing on their phones. And I actually asked on Twitter the other day, what are some of the things you've done with your phone on your phone that might surprise people? Because you can actually You can be reading a book, you can be studying
Sure.
a language, you can be looking up constellation information about constellations that you're seeing in the sky, or identifying birds. There's so many things you can do with phones. But I also, on the subject of kids, I have had older people complain about the grammar of younger people, but then there's just always going to be a tension between the language of older people and younger, because we're formed at a particular time in a particular place. As I said, I was Valley girl. I mean, I didn't live in the Valley, but I grew up in the Girl
That,
era in LA.
yeah.
So there are things I do that younger people from other places aren't going to do on average, and there's a tension between us, and somehow uh, on how we use words and certain grammatical features. And I don't think that has to be a negative thing. I think it can actually be an interesting dynamic thing where you're thinking of language as this swirling, boiling cauldron of variety and interest, but still common elements that allow us to communicate. And a lot of kids are really interested in grammar. The one of my favorite groups was in Chicago. I'm hoping we can use this in the documentary that my husband is putting together, because this big group of high school kids in Chicago came up to the grammar table. I think there might have been 15 of them, something like that. And they were full of questions and so lively and so interested. Anyone who's feeling down on the future or down on youth, that's the
That's
kind.
what you need.
Focus on that there's so much energy and innovation, not just in language, but in all kinds of things with young people. And being able to take delight in that, I think, is kind of a key to feeling good about our present and our future.
Ellen, I agree. We hear too much about, of course, that's what gets pointed out, or the overview, or the kids these days, or what you might see in the news with some. And I find that very different. And it's, obviously what we choose to focus on or choose to think about. And
Yeah,
I prefer thinking positive when it's realistic, when it's something
right. I
realistic.
agree with
I
that.
think you
Realism is good.
Yeah, realism is good. You are wonderful. I don't want to make you late for your dentist, but I have a blast with you. I have so many, I don't know if you can see all the papers I have out. Probably didn't get to, because I just go off 5%, maybe 10% of the questions I wanted to ask you, but I love the book and I'm delighted with your personality. I'm so grateful that you did the gig with me. Can you take a minute and talk about your website or sites?
Oh, yes. I actually I'm probably more active on social media, but I have a website for the grammar table called grammartable.com. It's grammartable.com, where I have t-shirts and information about grammar doings. I'm most active on Twitter at my @grammartable account, because I can do polls there where you can have people vote blindly, so you can't see how people voted because people don't want to be seen vote. So I'll ask a question about verb form and then people can vote. If people Then the anonymity of the voting on Twitter is the key thing that makes that a really effective platform for me, because people don't want to be called out on their mistakes.
Yes. I appreciate being corrected, though, on the other hand. I suppose depending on how it's done, but I appreciate it. The additional states, are you going to be writing about it? That's going to be part of the documentary, both?
Definitely part of the documentary. I am trying to figure out what to do next. I have so many new stories. So I'm just thinking through possibilities now. I hope to write about them,
That's,
because
well,
they were dear to my heart. I'd never even been to Alaska before. So that was my first visit there, and it was really cool to 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 get that experience. I went in August. It was in the 50s the whole time, and it was just so interesting to see such a different place.
yeah, a different that would be interesting to see in the documentary. Any idea when I know it's early to ask, but any target? I want to say date, but target for the documentary to be released?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that
There's
has
a
to
lot.
happen, the goal is to finish it in early 2023. Man, that sounds like a big number, 2023. But
Yeah,
that's just a couple months from now.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I don't want to do, well, I will do the age thing, especially when you get to my age. It seems to go so much more quickly. But that's soon. That's soon. I'll be looking forward to that. I know you got to split. I keep saying that. I've loved talking with you, Ellen.
I'm fine. I'm not stressed out. I live very close to my dentist. You've got to have a very local dentist because you never know.
Yeah,
Flossing is very important.
yeah, yeah.
Flossing and grammar.
Your personality is so wonderful. I've learned so much, and I've loved this. Hopefully, I shouldn't ask. Hopefully, we can do it again down the road a little
I
bit.
would
Suffer
oh,
my
Louis,
madness.
I would love to. I feel we just have scratched the
Oh,
grammar and human surface here, and it would be an honor. I feel very flattered by your comments, and it
they're
was really
sincere.
a great joy for me. Thank you.
They're
Well, I can
see
tell
that.
that.
Then I get hung up on the word flattered. Is it really? Isn't flattering sort of? See, I'm gone. This is it. That's it. Thank you so much. Please, let's do it again.
Thank you.
And thank your husband for me.
Okay, I will.
I know
Thank
you
you.
both. This is a project you work on together, and I know
Very
that's
much
all of
so.
us.
I'm fortunate to have had him around.
I think both of you are fortunate to have each other.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you so much. Oh, folks, I have to tell you, it was weird to me because I was so seriously nervous last night